Hello guys, it's more Shockman 1000 here, and today I am going to refute some of the most common atheist arguments again. In case you do not know, this video is a sequel to my first video in which I also addressed arguments for atheism and refuted them. I feel like making these sorts of videos are important because as a Christian, I feel like many Christians are losing their faith and they are starting to doubt God and even left Christianity because of attacks and arguments against Christianity. Therefore, I feel and believe that refuting arguments and attacks against Christianity is important so that former Christians who left the Christian faith could go back to Christianity, and so that Christians who are starting to doubt Christianity will lose their doubts. Alright, so the first atheist argument that I'm going to refute is the Gospels were written many years after Jesus supposedly died and after the narrative events of the Gospels happened. Therefore, the Gospels are unreliable. First of all, we have not found the original manuscripts of the Gospels yet, so we cannot know for sure when the Gospels were written. The only way we can know they were written is by analyzing and observing the writing styles and clues within the text. For example, there is a book that claims that it was written during the 1600s, but the book uses modern English words instead of Old English words such as thou, thy, thee, and wherefore. By that fact, we can conclude and we can know that the book was actually written not during the 1600s. It was written during the modern times, many years after the claimed date of the book's authorship. But the thing is, Koine Greek has not really changed a lot during the first century, so it is hard to conclude when the Gospels were written solely based on the writing styles. Second of all, it is important to understand that the dating of the Gospels and other ancient books is at best an educated guess and at worst a foolish biased speculation. No one knows for sure when the Gospels were written. The only quote-unquote dates that we have are speculations and assumptions. You cannot really prove when the Gospel was written because the original manuscripts have not been found yet. And the dates vary from scholar to scholar. For example, suggested dates from the Book of Matthew range from 40 AD to as late as 140 AD. This wide range of dates from scholars indicates the subjective nature of the dating process. The presuppositions of the scholars that give dates to the Gospels greatly impact their dating of the Gospels. Third of all, even if the Gospels were written many years after Jesus' death, so what? The oldest manuscripts that we have about Alexander the Great were written 300 years after he lived, but no one doubts that Alexander the Great lived. The Gospels were still based on eyewitnesses and written by Jesus' disciples, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In John 21, verse 24, John claimed that he is the disciple who testifies to the events described in the Gospels and wrote them down. So we know that the Gospel of John was based on eyewitnesses. In Luke 1, verses 1 to 4, Luke claimed that he received his information from eyewitnesses. So we know that the Gospel of Luke was based on eyewitnesses. Now, before you say, and how do you know that the Gospels were written by Jesus' disciples? Let us get into the second argument. The second atheist argument is the Gospels are anonymous. Like the authors of the Gospels never wrote, I am Mark writing this or I am Matthew writing this. I hear this argument a lot from atheists and Bible skeptics when they debate against Christians. These atheists who use this argument claim that the Gospels are not eyewitnesses, they are unreliable, and they were not actually written by Jesus' disciples because the Gospels are anonymously written. Like Matthew never wrote, I am Matthew writing this, or Mark never wrote, I am Mark writing this. First of all, it was a common and normal way of writing at that time. At that time, it was normal and common to not write down your name or introduce yourself in first person when writing a book. For example, a Greek philosopher named Plutarch wrote 50 biographies, yet he never wrote his name in any of these 50 biographies. He never wrote something like, I am Plutarch writing this, or this is me, Plutarch, writing this. Another example is that Plato, a very famous Greek philosopher, also wrote anonymously, and another Greek philosopher named Porphyry also wrote anonymously. A Jewish historian named Josephus also wrote in third person, and Xenophon also wrote in third person. Yeah, people believe that the works of Plato, such as the Odyssey, the Republic, the Symposium, etc., were written by Plato because those books were historically attributed to Plato, which is the same reason why Christians believe that the four Gospels were written by the four um, apostles. So if an atheist argues that the Gospels were not written by the four apostles because the authors never really described themselves, then by their logic, the works of Plato and Plutarch were not written by Plato and Plutarch, but were instead written by someone else, and then later people mistook them as written by Plato and Plutarch. Second of all, we Christians believe that the four Gospels were written by the four apostles because the four Gospels were historically attributed to the four apostles by the early church fathers and multiple authors from 2000 years ago, such as Saint Irenaeus, Tertullian, Saint Clement, the Muratorian Canon, and Papias. Justin Martyr, a Christian apologist who was born in 100 AD, affirmed that the Gospels were the memoirs of the apostles multiple times in his books. So the identities of the authors of the Gospels are just undeniable. The third atheist argument is the Bible has been copied and translated numerous times, and we do not have the original manuscripts, so it might have been corrupted or changed. I hear atheists and Bible skeptics say this a lot when they discredit the Bible and debate against Christians. They argue that the Bible might have been changed or corrupted because we have not found the original manuscripts yet. The only things that we have are copies. While it is true that we haven't found the original manuscripts yet, I can refute this argument using 3 points. My first point is that there are over 24,000 manuscripts of the New Testament. 5,800 of them are Greek manuscripts, 10,000 of them are Latin manuscripts, and 9,300 of them are in other languages such as Syriac, Coptic, Slavic, Gothic, Nubian, Armenian, and Ethiopian. To conclude from my first point, the New Testament has been preserved in more manuscripts than any other ancient work of literature, and even if we do not have thousands of New Testament manuscripts, we will still have the majority of the New Testament preserved in the writings of the Church Fathers, since they quoted around 99% of the New Testament with 11 verses missing. If there was a large amount of intentional or accidental corruption, it would be easy to trace by comparing the manuscripts from different regions. My second point is that the oldest New Testament manuscript that we have found is P52, and it was written very close to the time when the original manuscript of John was written. According to scientists, P52 was written from around 90 to 125 AD. P52 contains a few verses from John, and according to the majority of scholars, John was written in about 90 to 125 AD, so P52 was written like 1 to 35 years after the original manuscript of John was written, very close to its time period. Other than the P52, we also found other ancient manuscripts such as P46, P66, and P67, which were all written from about 170 to 250 AD. My third point is that one of the early church fathers named Tertullian seems to suggest that the original manuscripts of the New Testament were still around when he was writing at the end of the 2nd century. Let me quote Tertullian: "Come now, you who would indulge a better curiosity, if you would apply to the business of salvation, run over to the apostolic churches, in which the very thrones of the apostles are still preeminent in their places, in which their own authentic writings are read." To conclude from my third point, it is possible that some of the ancient New Testament manuscripts were actually direct copies of the original manuscripts, since P52, P46, P66, and P67 were all written around that time. My fourth point is that most of the differences between the 24,000 New Testament manuscripts are just misspellings and mistranslations and copyist errors, not major differences that greatly change and affect doctrines. To conclude, there is absolutely no evidence that the Bible has been changed or corrupted. You can trust and rely on the Bible that you have now. The fourth atheist argument is, if God is good, kind, and all-loving, why does he send people to hell? I hear this argument a lot when atheists debate against theists and religious people. They argue that a good, omnibenevolent creature could never send people to hell. I will refute this argument using a few points. My first point is that Yahweh is a God of love and mercy, but he is also a God of justice and retribution. He is a God who judges and punishes evil. He is a God who listens to the cries of the oppressed and avenges their torment. He is a God who strikes down the wicked and the unrepentant, and justice could not exist without judgments and punishments. Because God is very holy and very righteous, he could not tolerate sin. He must punish sin, destroy all sinners. But because he is merciful, gracious, and loving, he decided to send his one and only Son to suffer and die on the cross for our sins so that we could avoid going to hell by believing in him, having faith in him, accepting him, confessing our sins to him, and repenting from our sins in his name. Second of all, there are different views and interpretations of hell. Not all Christians believe that hell is a literal torture chamber where the unsaved get burned and tortured for eternity. Some Christians believe in annihilationism, which states that when the unsaved die, they will just cease to exist. Some Christians believe in universalism, which states that the suffering in hell is only temporary and not eternal. And some Christians believe that hell is simply a state of mind. And some Christians believe that the suffering in hell is going to be spiritual and not physical. Third of all, when people go to hell, it's their fault for rejecting Christ and continuing to live a sinful lifestyle. It is not God's fault. Let me use the story/illustration. There was once a father who had a son. He really loves his son. He would work hard just to feed him and provide for him, and would try his hardest to make him happy no matter what. And this father's goal is to make his son happy and keep him safe. But one day, the son stole his father's credit card, killed his father's wife, and also burned down the house. So then the son was brought to court, and the judge sentenced the son to death for his crimes, and he was sent to prison. But even after all of this, the father still loves the son and still wants the son to get out and accept him as his father again. So then the father approached his son. Uh, well, so then the father approached the prison and told the warden to release his son. But the warden told the father that to release his son, he must pay $1 billion to the prison. But the father does not have that much money. So then for the father to obtain that amount of money, he must sell his liver, eye, and one of his lungs. So then the father sold those organs and gained $1 billion, and he paid the money to the prison, and now the son has the option to get out. If the son refused to get out and instead waited in the cell until his execution date, he would be fried to death by the electric chair. But if the son chose to get out, his sentence would be shortened to a few more years and would finally be released and would get to be with his father. The son rejected the money offering and stayed in his cell and waited until his execution date and got fried to death by the electric chair as a result. Whose fault is it, the father or the son? In this illustration/story, the son represents humanity that fell into sin, the father represents God, the large amount of money represents Jesus' sacrifice, the prison represents the sinful and fallen world, and the electric chair represents hell, and the option to stay in our cell or get out represents the option to either accept Christ and be saved or reject Christ and be damned. Sorry, my mouth is dry. Okay, so the fifth atheist argument is if a person has never heard of Jesus before and the person dies, will he go to heaven or hell? Now, I must admit that this argument is pretty good, and I also admit that I do not know the answer for sure since I am not God. Here are some possibilities. The first possibility is that God would reveal Christ to that person, maybe through a dream or through a vision or something like that, so that the person would have the choice to either accept Christ or reject Christ. Second possibility is that God would judge that person based on his deeds, actions, behaviors, and morals. Like if the person is really good, really kind, really righteous, and never committed a severe sin, then maybe God would be merciful and gracious enough to allow that person to enter heaven. The third possibility is that God would judge that person based on his conscience and his obedience to his conscience. I have a bunch of verses to back this up. In John 9:41, Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." In John 15:22, Jesus said, "If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin." And in Romans, Paul also talked about how our conscience judges us. Alright, so the sixth atheist argument is there are thousands of religions and gods. What makes Christianity or the Christian God any different? I hear this argument a lot from atheists when they debate with not only Christians but also Muslims, Jews, and people from other religions. But the thing is that Christianity is unique and different compared to other religions. My first point is that Christianity has the most advanced and revolutionary values and teachings. In a time and society full of wars, battles, racism, and violence, in a time and society where people watch executions and tortures just for fun, and during a time and society where people watch bloody and ruthless fights in the arena just for fun, Jesus saw love, forgiveness, peace, turning the other cheek, tolerance, and treating others the way you want to be treated. The values and moral teachings of Christianity are revolutionary and really advanced for its time. Other religions, such as Islam, do not teach good moral values and moral teachings. The Quran promotes hatred and animosity towards sinners and unbelievers, unlike Christianity, which teaches that we should love and forgive sinners, tell sinners and unbelievers to repent, and treat sinners and unbelievers with patience, compassion, and kindness. The Quran also teaches that we should fight and kill unbelievers, unlike Christianity. The Quran teaches that we should hate our enemies and get revenge, unlike Christianity, which teaches that we should love and forgive our enemies. My second point is that Christianity has far more evidence than any religion. The Bible, which is the holy book of Christianity, contains many prophecies that have been fulfilled. Daniel 11 and Ezekiel 26 are some of the best examples of biblical prophecies being fulfilled. Daniel 11 predicted that King Xerxes would be richer than the other Persian kings and that he would attack Greece, and it also predicted the division of Alexander the Great's kingdom. Ezekiel 26 predicted that the city of Tyre would be destroyed, and it did happen. Alexander the Great attacked and destroyed Tyre in 332 BC, which is 200 years after Ezekiel was written. The resurrection of Christ, which is the central point of Christianity, has many eyewitnesses' accounts and testimonies, and the deaths of the apostles, along with the liar, Lord, or lunatic argument, all prove Christianity. So the seventh atheist argument is, why does God need to create people that he already knows will go to hell? I must admit that this argument is a really good argument against God and Christianity. Sometimes I also doubt and question God because of this argument, but I will try to refute this argument using 2 points. My first point is that if God does not create people that will go to hell and only created those that will go to heaven, then we wouldn't really have free will. We wouldn't be free, libertarian creatures that have the freedom and ability to choose whatever we want. God wants humanity to have free will and do whatever we want and receive the consequences of our actions. Galatians 6:7 says that a man reaps what he sows. So I believe that God creates people that will go to hell because he wants us to have free will and be free creatures. My second point is that I do not believe that God's omniscience is 100% complete. I do not believe that He knows the future 100%. I only believe that He only knows the what ifs and every possible choice that we could possibly make, and every consequence of every choice. I have many Bible verses to back this up, such as Genesis 6 verse 6 and Matthew 11 verse 23. I believe that God's omniscience works like this. Imagine if you are a video game developer and you just made a new multiple choice game that is similar to Until Dawn or Detroit Become Human. Because you are the developer of the game, you know every choice that the players could make, every consequence and event that those choices will lead to, and which choices will lead to which ending, but you don't know what choices the player would choose. So one day you invited your friend to try out and play your new game that you just made. You do not know the choices that your friend would make, but you know each possible choice that your friend can make, and you know what endings and consequences those choices would lead to. You want your friend to get a good ending where all the characters survive, but your friend also has the free will to get the bad ending where all the characters die. I believe this is how God's omniscience for knowledge works.